And now we welcome a driver who I ran into on a charge through the field in Portland. He's run late model races and driven for the godfather of NASCAR, Rick Hendrick. He's won the 24 Hours of Daytona, the 24 Hours of Le Mans, the 12 Hours of Sebring, and 4 IMSA championships. And he's done all of this while operating under an alter ego. It's none other than Jordan Rodney Sandstorm Taylor on the Money Lap Live. Welcome to the show, buddy. Thank you for coming on. Would be way cooler there with the clap. Yeah. How did I do? Thank you. Beautiful. Thanks for clapping with us. Yeah, we appreciate it. Yeah. We try to give each guest a real build-up, and yours was easy because you've done a lot. Yeah. Really easy.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
So much. Yeah, and you've doing so much that we're actually recording this. You're our first ever Money Lap Live guest that we recorded. So you have that honor because you don't have much of an off season. You switched from Corvette back to Acura, Wayne Taylor Racing, and from GT to GTP. You recently were at a test. You got a simulator and you got another test. What off season do you have? Is there one?
Yeah, I thought I was actually going to have an off season this year, but yeah, I've already been to Indy once for 3 days for a simulator test. Then we did a Sebring test. And yeah, now tomorrow morning I fly back to Indy for 2 days in the sim, drive down to Bowling Green to do a shakedown of the 2 new cars, and then fly back to Florida to do our Daytona test, mid next week. Wow. So yeah, a lot going on, but there's a lot to learn with this new class. So I'm actually glad that I get the seat time to kind of get a better understanding of everything.
And I want to dive into that because I don't think people appreciate, who don't know what's going on in IMSA right now in the sports car world, how intricate these cars are. From what you came from the GT side, which is, molded towards this GT3 homologation throughout the world, to this GTP category, the top level of prototypes that's across, in WEC and at Le Mans and also here in IMSA. These cars are insanely intricate. Like this is the highest level of technology in sports car racing right now. And they're crazy.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I don't think I really respected it from the outside when I was in GT, like when this new class came in. And obviously my brother's been in the class for a year now and he was telling me all these different systems. But yeah, the manual just to control the steering wheel was 30 pages long. And before the first test, trying to read through it and understand what it is and what it takes was just ridiculous. And then, yeah, I do my first run in the car. I did 2 runs in the car on day 1. And I honestly never even looked at the steering wheel because there was so much going on just from a driving point of view that I didn't have time to look down. And then, day 2, they're having me go through all these different changes of, brake balance, brake migration, differential changes, traction control changes, and then all sorts of different sensor resets. So there's just a million things going on. And then you have to drive the car on top of that. So it's good that we can, get these test days in real life. And then now that, we have the HPD simulator, we can practice those system changes in the sim as well. So it's a little bit more natural when we get to the racetrack.
And I'm curious about that because I feel like every time I've done the IMSA broadcasting stuff, I'm always asking these similar questions, but the technology is changing all the time. And for you're jumping from that GT car and GT category that went away from even, maybe a couple of years ago when it was GTLM was closer to a prototype in a lot of ways, right? And what you had there for the GT3, which is ABS and traction control and just all these aids. What is that like? Let's dive into the driving. Normally I have Landon Cassill here who's going to dive into the driving even deeper, but tell me is it your braking pressure that's changing and just the mentality that changes? How different is that?
Yeah, I mean, GTLM was an amazing class. That was for the NASCAR fans, GTLM was the premier GT class that we had worldwide. And it was an open tire. So, we would work with Michelin, with Corvette, and develop a tire just for our car. So it was an amazing tire. We'd do 3 hours on a set of tires at Le Mans, and your last lap of the last stint would be your fastest one. That's how good the tires were. So you developed this amazing car on this tire and all the technology. And then now it's been shifted to this GT3 spec where the tire that we run now is more of a spec tire that kind of goes across all the car brands. So there's nothing too crazy about it. It's very durable. But you also have ABS now, which is a huge, asset to a driver just to kind of make the brake zones a little bit easier. But it kind of closes up the gap between all the drivers and the competition. So it makes it more difficult to pass. And, the guys are making less mistakes. So going back to GTP, you lose that, ABS feel. So now you've kind of got to brake with your foot again and have ABS in your foot not to cause lockups. And then, yeah, I think the driving style changes massively with that, because with the ABS, you can just kind of stand on the brake pedal as hard as you want, and the system's going to control everything for you. The GT car is also way softer. It's more, mechanically sound. It doesn't have as much downforce. Then you go back to the prototype and it's all aero. So all the springs are stiff. The roll bars are way stiffer. You're just trying to keep as stable as a platform as possible to kind of keep the floor very smooth, to keep the floor working just for all the downforce. So coming back to it, it felt like driving a massive go-kart again with a ridiculous amount of horsepower, especially around Sebring where it's bumpy. So it took a couple laps to get comfortable, but at the end of the day, it was just another race car. I learned how to drive a late model this year, a Cup car, an Xfinity car, and it was the same learning process. It's still got a steering wheel, pedals, and 4 tires. So you just kind of figure out how to drive it and what it likes.
And I want to dive into the NASCAR stuff for sure, obviously, because I think that was a really cool thing to see and the experience you had there. We'll get into it in a minute, but I just want to stick on this GTP stuff and the prototypes. And you mentioned, sort of the difference in the braking, that sort of thing. I know you're really fit. I think you just recently did an Ironman. But one of the things that stuck out to me jumping between different race cars is sometimes just the level of brake pressure required, or the amount, the force you're hitting that thing with, which I think is one of the more physical things. Add in downforce, which can make it a more physical race car. Is there big difference for you? I know you say it's just a race car, but how different is that even just physically when you look at doing endurance races and your stints and that sort of thing from what you've been doing on the GT side?
Yeah, thankfully the brake pedal wasn't too heavy. That was a concern. The biggest thing for me was the G-forces. G-forces have gone way up for me from GT to prototype. I mean, a GT car makes good grip, but when you add in the downforce of a prototype, it's a different level. So, we did 2 days at Sebring like we've got here on video. It's got some high speed sections, but by the end of the test, my ribs, my back, my core, my neck, everything was sore. So I've got to get back to the gym, stop doing all my triathlon training, which is just, cardio, and start working on some muscles again that I haven't done any work. So yeah, I was shocked how much of that kind of muscle memory my body lost from back when I drove prototypes a few years ago, and kind of reminded me how physical these cars can be.
God, that's crazy, man. It's like go-karts. Like every time I've hopped in a go-kart after a couple years out, it beats the shit out of me. I'm like,
yeah, exactly. Yeah. It felt the same. I was sore for 2 days after.
And Sebring's brutal. I used to wear, I trusted some open wheel cars down there and I had to wear knee pads inside.
Because, an open wheel car around there is not fun. It's not designed for Sebring.
No, it's atrocious at this point. It's an awesome racetrack, but atrocious. Just talking about your teammates you're going to be with, Louis Delatraz would be your main teammate in the IMSA category. And then obviously it was announced for the Rolex, Colton Herta coming over. So I think that's one of the coolest things. You talk about all this stuff you've driven this year, but one of the things you guys experience a lot in endurance racing, especially like the Rolex 24, is these drivers from other categories coming in. Have you dealt much with Colton, talked to him much, that sort of thing, and just sort of how are you dealing with your teammate Louis?
Yeah, I mean, Louis is great. He was with the team, I think the last year and a half probably as third driver, so he knows the car. He's won the ELMS championship like 3 or 4 times. He won the WEC championship last year, so super successful guy, super young. I always still feel like I'm still the young guy, but he's like 9 years younger than me, so he's making me feel old. Colton, I've known, a little bit for a few years, just through social media and saying hello at the racetrack. He seems like a great guy. He's won Daytona twice. So for us, it's about getting quick guys, obviously, but guys who obviously know endurance racing. And he's, been with BMW for years. He won, Daytona in an LMP2 car. And we also have Jensen Button coming on, who I worked with through the Garage 56 program. And just another amazing guy, amazing talent, obviously Formula One world champion, has got insane experience that he can kind of bring to the program. So yeah, that's the really cool thing about Daytona that, a lot of other sports and series don't get. We've had so many drivers coming from different disciplines, NASCAR, Formula One, Indycar, every discipline comes to Daytona and tries to win. So as a driver like you always want to compare yourself to other guys in different sports. So there's no better comparison when they jump in the same car as you to kind of get a fair shot and fair see of what you're like compared to an IndyCar driver, a NASCAR driver, a Formula One driver. And I've been lucky enough to drive with guys like Kobayashi, Fernando Alonso, Jeff Gordon, Ryan Hunter-Reay, Formula One champions, Indy 500 champions, NASCAR champions. And it's so interesting to see, their background and how they approach a weekend and how they go about their racing. And you can learn a lot from those types of guys.
And you're probably the first driver they ever met that had an alter ego. That possibly were they more excited to meet Rodney or Jordan? Do you think when you met some?
Well, the whole Rodney thing was birthed on that Jeff Gordon weekend back in 2017 when he was my teammate. So if he wasn't my teammate, that whole thing never would have happened. But that was the funny thing when Alonso showed up. One of the first things he did, like the first thing he did when he met me in person was like he went down on one knee and was like, he's going to make a video about me. I guarantee it. So he knew kind of what he was coming into, and he was so fun. Like he gets a certain face on him, when he's competitive, but behind closed doors, he was always down for having some fun. He wore the Rodney jacket. He did some videos as Rodney himself. So yeah, that whole alter ego thing has definitely taken on a life of its own, which has been fun to kind of ride the wave of.
I got to interview Fernando on that rain out one, and got walking down pit lane in an absolute monsoon, and he was so gracious with his time and actually kind of funny during it. And I remember thinking, well, that's the coolest guy I've ever met. There you go. No offense to you. I just thought he was pretty cool to be an F1 world champ and to just take that time in the midst of the rain. I'm curious though, you mentioned the Garage 56. So you've done all this cool stuff, but probably the coolest car of the last decade that showed up in motorsports. Just this thing, dude. I mean, for all of us in the NASCAR world, it was like, wow, I can't believe they're doing it. That's awesome. And I kept checking in with Chad Canals at times, being like, okay, what's the latest update? I got to see the engine you guys had back at ECR when they were first dynoing it, and just sort of see that thing come together. But I mean, being a part of that program, that had to be just like the wildest experience of all time.
Yeah, it was so cool. Like Chad was obviously involved with Jimmy's stuff on the sports car side when Jimmy was doing some IMSA races. So I kind of got to know them a little bit through that on the sports car side, and obviously knowing them through Jeff Gordon from the 2017 year. I was doing the same thing. I was, reaching out to Chad, every couple of months before kind of the car came to life, just to say like, hey, if you ever need help from a sports car side or a different perspective, I'd love to be involved. And once all the drivers were announced, I was like, all right, I guess that's that. And then I got a call to kind of help on the side as a coach, which was just a ridiculous title, but it was fun. And I was just so happy to be involved with the program with, legends of drivers that they had. And then to work with a team like Hendrick was incredible, just to see their work ethic. I went to the first test of Daytona with them, and, you're on calls before and after the test, reviewing everything, going over every lap that you did, if you ask for one change in the car on one day, it's in the car for the next day. So just a work ethic of all the different sides that were involved was just insane. And to see the progression from where it was at the first test to where it ended up being at Le Mans was just incredible to see the progression of the car. And like when it was back in those black colors, it looked super mean, and the car was so different to drive back then to when we got to Le Mans. So it was super cool. Obviously, we all spent so much time together through all those tests. We did like a couple Sebring tests. We did a 24-hour there. We did Coda, Daytona, and then Le Mans. So the buildup was insane. We knew how cool the car would be, but I don't think anyone could have anticipated how popular it would end up being.
No doubt. What's the part that like stuck out to you the most? What surprised you in that program and through that experience? When you think back, you're like, that was nuts. That's insane. How did that happen? Or how did we do that?
I mean, the race itself went super well. I think no one expected us to be like battling the GT cars or ahead of the GT cars for the majority of the race. So I think the speed of the car was super impressive, especially with the limitations that we had on the development side. We were only allowed to do certain things to kind of take it to a next level. So if they were kind of unleashed to, sorry, my arm keeps going over because I'm petting my dog, or else he's going to jump up.
I like it. Bring him on. Bring him on.
Yeah. He would love to, but
our podcast listeners, we have to explain, just so you know, this is also in podcast form. So we try to explain anything visual that's happening. That's
No, that's true.
There's your dog just popped up here. What's his name again?
This is Chachi. Yeah.
Chachi. Got it. Got it.
But
Hi, Josh.
yeah, so I think the level of performance was super impressive, and then I just think the attention to detail that Hendrick, goes through was insane. I mean, Le Mans is such a unique event with so many funny little rules and regulations that you just don't know unless you're there in person. And when we got there, everything was organized. Nothing missed a beat, like from tech and scrutineering to rolling through the weekend, like no issues with practice or rules or violations, strategy, pit stops. I mean, everything went so well. And for just a basic, like a NASCAR team going to Le Mans, it was unbelievable that they had such a perfect performance. And it kind of shows why they have so much success on the NASCAR side.
It's awesome, man. That thing is so mean. There's still photos popping up like when they had it on the grid.
It sounded so good. Yeah,
it was sitting there and it just looked like SUV.
The funny story at when we took it to Charlotte, we got to do like a lap before the Cup race at the Roval, and they're like, we showed up at like 7 a.m. or 8 a.m. to do like 3 laps to just make sure the car ran okay, and then NASCAR came up to us and they're like, all right, you can do. Now that we saw that the car's pretty fast, you can do 2 laps before. So like once the anthem ends, you do 2 laps and then pull off the track as fast as possible because the cars are rolling for green. So like, all right. And I'm like, well, can we do a burnout? And they're like, no burnouts. And I'm like, oh, okay, no problem. And I've never done like a proper burnout before, so I wasn't sure how to do it anyway. And then I'm like driving around and like the fans, like there's a ton of fans there who like just love the car. And I'm like going down the back street, I'm like, why not just do a burnout? So like I turn off TC and I come across the line and I just do a big burnout down the front straight. And with Cailman, I'm like, oh, sorry about the burnout. And then NASCAR came up afterwards. I'm like, oh, I'm really sorry about the burnout. Like I just had to do it. And they're like, yeah, and it's okay. We knew you were going to do it anyway. So it all worked out.
Rock on. Definitely for that crowd. And they love burnouts and that sort of thing.
Definitely.
So, I mean, on that weekend, you completed your NASCAR adventure this year, racing the Xfinity Series with us. But I got to say, like, this goes back a couple of months where you went and did the Cup race at COTA, did late model racing this year, Xfinity race. What caused this? I know this was an interest for you. You and I had talked about it before, but how did this all come together? And do you think you were more excited or Rodney was more excited for the NASCAR adventure?
Yeah, I mean, Rodney was definitely excited. He's been waiting for this moment. But yeah, I mean, it's been a topic. Yeah, we've talked about it a bunch of times whenever you're on the IMSA weekends, just picking your brain about it. And Bill Lester was my teammate back in 2012 or 2011, and he's been pushing me to do it for a decade now. It's just hard to get opportunities like, especially coming from a sport car side with no experience. So the Garage 56 thing is really what kind of created this last push to kind of get my name in there. And when Chase unfortunately had his accident, we were actually testing at COTA in that Garage 56 car when I got the call. So it was just good timing to fill in at that event for Chase in the Hendrick car. So that kind of got the ball rolling to do that race. And then once we got through that weekend, Chris Rice from Colleague, I think, spoke to Jeff Gordon to see if I'd be available for Portland and the Roval. And then that kind of snowballed into the late model opportunity through Greg Ives, who was the Garage 56 crew chief. So it all kind of stemmed off that Garage 56 program, which is awesome to kind of get those opportunities. And I had a blast doing all of them. I think, the Cup race didn't go very well. Practice and qualifying were a lot of fun.
You were super fast
at Portland.
Yeah.
I was fast. I just got knocked around like crazy in the race and just didn't race very well. But Portland, I loved. Like the guys racing that I was racing around you. A lot of the guys at the front there were just super respectful, and it was just a different experience that I had at COTA. So I loved that experience. The car was fun to drive. I felt competitive. And then, the Roval was a struggle. I just never felt that comfortable. And I'd say the late model was probably one of the most fun things I've ever done. Just the racecraft and racing style, the driving style on that little track was a ton of fun. So yeah, it was a good little taster this year. So I'm not sure where it's going to go, but yeah, hopefully we'll get some more races down the road.
And you mentioned the Roval being tough. You and I talked about that. I mean, that place, that's probably, I think it's the hardest place we go in an Xfinity car because there's zero room. Even the street course in Chicago is easier because for whatever reason you kind of in it with the street course mentality. But that place for that Roval, it's so awkward and there's so many off-camber corners and different grip level changes that you don't have a good sensation of speed in a lot of areas, and you almost just have to drive it by feel. And like that would be so hard for you to do having such little experience.
Yeah, it was tricky. I mean, Portland, like practice was a struggle at Portland for sure. Just kind of understanding what wheel hop was. You know, I've never felt what that was like, and you definitely know when you have wheel hop. I found that out really quick.
It's not,
and then
there's a little joke on that before you go further. That it's like struck down upon you by Zeus at times or something. You know, like here's wheel hop, but there's a reason it happens.
It is unbelievable. Yeah, for people that don't know what wheel hop is, it's like the most violent thing you've ever felt. Like if I felt that in a sports car, I'd be like, all right, the race is over, the car is broken for sure. But Portland, I loved, like the car was fun to drive. But yeah, when I went to the Roval, I was like, all right, I'm just gonna pick up where I left off at Portland, and it was like I was relearning everything again. It was just difficult. I mean, practice is still only 20 minutes. The peak of the tire is only there for 3 laps. So by the time you're getting more comfortable, the grip's going down, and then you get thrown in qualifying, and you have 1 lap to do it again. So it's difficult to jump in on your weekends to get up to speed. And I think even if I had an hour of practice and a couple of sets of tires, it would still be difficult. The level of competition is just so high, and it's difficult to just jump in and go and be at the front. So yeah, it was a good experience. I mean, I had a lot of fun in both races, you know, more obviously at Portland, just being towards the front. At the Roval, I was kind of in the mix and getting pushed around again, just kind of out of water a little bit. But yeah, it's a good experience. In those tough situations, you learn a lot.
I have to can empathize with you because I just think that place was so tough. And, you know, the Portlands and that Dakota is like, it drives more traditional, but for every reason that Roval is so difficult. So I can't imagine jumping in 15 minutes, 1 lap qualifying. I mean, I was doing it with you, but I obviously been there in that car for 30 some, 28 some weekends or something. So I had a little head start on you.
It's difficult.
Go ahead. Yeah.
I was just going to say, go ahead.
So a question that Landon Cassill will kill me if I don't ask, because we're all drivers on here. We love to ask sort of about your process. You mentioned driving all these different cars and jumping from GT to GTP, and some drivers talk about, you know, how they prep for a week. Maybe it's watching tape and look at data and that sort of thing, but everyone has their own process. What's your process? What's something unique maybe that you do that others don't? And what allows you to prepare to drive a race, you know, your normal race car, if it's GTP now in the future for a race weekend, or jumping off and doing an Xfinity race?
Yeah, my favorite thing video. Like before Coda and the NASCAR race, I had the Hendrick guys had like hours and hours of footage of the previous year's races. So I spent every night just watching hours of onboard race footage. I like watching old races as well. You kind of get an idea of where guys are passing, where guys are making mistakes, different lines, listening to the commentators, like calling certain things out if something's happening with the track or track evolution. Like I've got the Rolex 24 as my next race. So I'm started watching old years races. It's a 24-hour race. If you just go on YouTube, you can watch any cars on board. So yeah, there's a lot to learn. Obviously, I've done the Rolex a bunch of times now, but getting back into a prototype, kind of watching the traffic flow, where you can pass, where you can't. Obviously, this car is different to the prototype I used to drive, so the passing zones are a little bit different where you can make moves. So yeah, for me, video's always been good. Simulations, obviously, for me, I love watching it. And once the weekend starts, like I'm a big data guy as well. So going over data, kind of understanding my strengths and weaknesses and where I can improve.
Love it. The internet's striking. I think we're starting to lose you. So at this point, we'll let you go. Thank you so much, man, for coming on the Money Lap Live. Good luck at the Daytona test and obviously the Rolex 24 in the IMSA season, man. I will most likely be at the Rolex 24 with you. So I'll come by and say hi. Awesome. Best of luck. Thanks for joining us. Hey there. I got a request. Can you please like,
subscribe, and hit the bell icon below to be alerted to when we post all this great content. And really, it's a pact, because if you do that, then we'll keep posting great content. Also, join us on Wednesdays from 12 to 3 p.m. Eastern Time for the live show, Money Lap Live. We interview people from around the motorsports world and just talk all things motorsports. It's awesome. Join us there.